Starting off Unit 2, Lesson 1, we're going to be talking about the ancient Greece. But in this whole unit, we're going to be talking about different civilizations that emerged out of the foundations of civilization. You're going to notice that the Greeks, the Romans, and the early Chinese, they're going to be really the ones that are going to be leading the charge in culture development. So, why do I bring this up? Is because I want us to look at how culture basically shaped societies. We're going to talk about some institutions as well, and I defined both what culture is and what institutions are on societies. But I really want to look at the practice and then basically all the different religions, food, social habits, music, arts, language, government, and all that fun stuff that make up culture specifically. You're going to notice early on it's going to be heavy on government and then later on the other parts of culture. So, with today, it's going to be a lot of causes and effects. The summative question for this unit will be which civilization had the largest impact on today's society? So, make sure you're thinking about that as we go through each of the lessons. So, again, the Greek culture. How did it impact other societies? So, in the beginning, geography, environmental factors pokes his head around again. We're right around like 1700 BCE when the Greeks kind of start blipping up on the radar, and they're actually going to be around a couple of different seas in our world. So the Mediterranean Sea, here's Italy, if that gives you any point of reference, are going to be in this area. Now, they're not all unified quite yet like they are today. However, they had to travel because they lacked a bunch of natural resources that are needed for settling. Think about your house. You're going to need wood for your house or metals for different farmlands and so on and so forth. And this is a really mountainous area. So they got to go around and they got to farm and then ship the food back, if that makes sense. So, two groups are going to merge into one to make ancient Greeks. And it's going to be right around like 1200 BCE. And at some point, they're going to combine, and we don't really know how. This is a history mystery, I guess you would say. But the two groups are the Mycenaeans, and they're a big deal because there are the story of the Trojan horse and the Trojan War and stuff like that. That's them. Okay, so have you ever heard of that? So that story I'll talk about a little bit more in a little bit. But then we also have the Myonians, and they are really on the island of Crete, which is right here. So again, somewhere they're going to combine. They're going to combine their language, combine their writing, combine basically their religion, their politics, and all the other forms of art, since they made that, makes sense. And they're going to come together to form to know what we know as ancient Greece. And all of a sudden, they're going to disappear for like 400 years. So we know what we know about this because of word of mouth stories, mostly by this guy, Homer. So chances are you've heard his work. Okay, so the Iliad, that's the Trojan War, Achilles, Hector, Paris, and all that fun stuff. Then you have the Odyssey. And I can't remember if you guys read this in high school or not, but this is about Ulysses and his journey home from the Trojan War. And man, he runs into some crap. He talks about some mermaids, he talks about some monsters, and it's a pretty good read if you're into that type of stuff. But again, we don't really know for sure, so it's kind of a big mystery, but then all of a sudden they start popping up again. But first, why did early Greeks travel around the Mediterranean Sea? And then here's where they pop up again. You're going to notice that because of that geography, they're going to start settling in what's known as city states. So these are smaller communities that are all going to act as like smaller, for a lack of a better term, cities. And they're each going to basically develop on their own and very independently. They're not going to really communicate a whole lot with one another. Reason being, it's really, really hard to travel in this area. So here's an example. So here are the Olympus Mountains. Okay, they're going to be mythical in a way, but we don't really want to go into that. But could you imagine traveling over top of this to be able to talk to the city state next to you? That'd be pretty dang hard. So you could run into different problems along the way, like your wheels breaking or anything like that, and then you're screwed. You're stuck there because you don't have any tools to fix it. So, why does this all matter? Again, it leads to basically isolated communities called city states. And life in the city states are as follows. So, it says the city state or the polis evolved during the period of 1200 to 500 BCE, and they offered a unique organization for the Greeks. Each polis was independent in its particular form of government. It provided its own defense arrangements. It conducted its own foreign policy, and thus one city state might be a monarchy, another a democracy, and a third an oligarchy. And this is from a guy who has a doctorate in ancient history, so we can probably trust him. So you have to be thinking, based on what I just said, based on what this just said and highlight here in red, why would it be so different from city state to city state? And again, they're kind of on their own, and it's basically because of the geography, the isolation, if you will. So this polis, and if you ever wonder why some of these cities here in the United States end in polis, like Minneapolis, Indianapolis, it's because of that. It's the city of whatever state it's in. So, anyways, if you ever wonder about how big these things are, here's an idea. So, Bettendorf is about 22 square miles. That's not very big. Scott County itself, so like all the way down to Eldridge, to the Wapsie, all the way to the Mississippi, and then as far north as it goes, it's going to be 368 square miles. And that is still smaller than what most city states were during the time on average, or the biggest one, I guess I would say, probably the better way of saying it. But they were only home to about 10,000 people. So Bettendorf has about 20,000, 30,000 people in it by itself. So again, it's going to be spread out, most likely for farming reasons. But again, by 750 BCE, you're going to notice each one of these city states, and you can see some of the major ones here, are going to start forming their own political identities. And this is going to come to clash here in a little bit. But you have a monarchy, which is like a king and queen, an aristocracy, which is basically really rich people taking over, an oligarchy, which is a small group of people, like a council, if you will, that make decisions, and then a direct democracy. Most of these are still around today, except for the oligarchy one. That one I'm not too sure about. But you can make an argument that we're an oligarchy as well, but I'll talk about that later. So, why did early Greek city states settle in communities known as what? That's a funny question. All right, so here's a chart that's going to help you out: monarchy, aristocracy, oligarchy, direct democracy. All of these are present. We talked about monarchy a little bit in the last unit, so we're going to kind of skip over that. That's pretty simple. Kings. Oligarchy, small group of people. You're going to notice that's Sparta. We're going to talk about them later, but they're going to be the oligarch government. The aristocracy, I'm going to skip over also just because it's important, but it's not really important. We care a lot about direct democracy because that is going to be the one that's going to impact us in our livelihood here in the United States. So here is the basis of it. So people are going to govern themselves. And this is the word and how it breaks down. And that's kind of the big deal. But why this is all such a big deal is that this is going to be one of the first times in human history that man is going to be able to make their own decisions about things that they want to do or not to do. So, for example, if they want to go to war, people would vote and choose yes or no. They're choosing their fate. That is a big deal. So, a direct democracy versus a democracy. It's very simple in the name. In a direct democracy, people voted for themselves. They acted on themselves. They participated themselves directly. In our country today, in the United States, we have a representative democracy, which means we elect people to do our talking, if you will. So, people in Athens, they were able to vote, they were able to basically participate in any government discussion as long as you were a free white male. You were not able to participate if you were a woman, a slave, or born outside of Athens. So not everybody was able to vote. So here's a chart to break it down just a little bit more. So if you need to pause it, pause it. But here's how Athens rolled. Here's how the United States rolls. And then here's the overlap. This is what we have in common. You see, there's a lot of similarities. If you want to get down to the nitty gritty of things, you can make an argument that we are very similar. You can make an argument that we're not very similar. So take a look at it. But the things are worth noting. Different branches of government, they had it. We have it. So here, true or false, all people could vote in Athens democracy.